The training grounds of Vraxis 9, a war-torn alien world, buzzed with activity. The air was thick with the scent of metal, sweat, and burning fuel. Soldiers of different species clashed in combat drills, their battle cries echoing across the field. In the center of it all stood Sergeant Leon Carter, a veteran human warrior from the Terran Defense Corps. His armor, made of dark carbon titanium alloy, gleamed under the twin suns. His stance was firm, his movements precise. He had been sent here as part of an interspecies training exchange, to prove that humans could stand alongside the strongest warriors in the galaxy. Across from him, Vera, a young warrior of the Xalvian race, stood with her arms crossed, her scaled skin shimmering with a natural armor. She was taller than Leon, her deep blue eyes filled with amusement as she sized him up. "You rely too much on that metal shell, human," Vera said, smirking. Her voice carried a hint of arrogance, her confidence unshaken. "What happens when you take it off? Are you still strong then?" A few Xalvian warriors standing behind her chuckled. They had heard stories of human soldiers, but to them, humans were still fragile creatures of flesh, weak without their technology. Leon didn't react to the laughter. Instead, he smiled, adjusting the vambrace on his left arm. "You think I'm weak because of this armor?" he asked calmly. Vera tilted her head, her sharp teeth flashing as she grinned. "It's obvious, isn't it? Without it, your soft skin wouldn't last a second in a real fight." Leon chuckled, shaking his head. "Then why don't you test that theory?" The smirk on Vera's face widened. "A challenge." She loved challenges. "Fine," she said, stepping forward. "Let's see what's behind that metal." The other warriors gathered around, forming a loose circle around them. The air grew tense with anticipation. Leon took a step forward and cracked his neck. "All right, the Xalvian warrior. Let's make this interesting. 1 round. You land a solid hit on me, you win. I stay standing, I win." Vera laughed. "1 hit. That's all." She clenched her fists, the ridges on her knuckles sharpening like small blades. "I won't even need a second strike." Leon smirked. "We'll see." A Xalvian officer stepped between them and raised a hand. "Combatants ready." Vera dropped into a stance, her muscles tensed. Leon simply stood relaxed, as if he wasn't worried at all. "Begin." Vera exploded forward, faster than any human should be able to react to. She was a natural predator, her movements fluid, her strength terrifying. She aimed a punch straight at Leon's chest, expecting his armor to slow him down, but he moved. With a slight tilt of his body, Leon dodged effortlessly, letting the punch pass just inches from his ribs. Vera's eyes widened. He was faster than she expected. She recovered quickly, twisting into a spinning kick. Again, Leon moved, just enough to evade. His footwork was smooth, precise. Not a single wasted movement. The Xalvians watching murmured in surprise. This human was different. Vera gritted her teeth. She wouldn't let a human make her look like a fool. She rushed again, launching a series of rapid punches, each one meant to end the fight. But Leon didn't even block. He simply avoided every strike with slight shifts of his body, his movements almost lazy. Vera's frustration grew. Why wasn't he fighting back? She growled and went for a powerful full-force strike, aiming for his side. But Leon moved first. In an instant, he stepped inside her guard and tapped her forehead lightly with 2 fingers. "Tag," he said with a grin. Vera froze. Silence fell over the training grounds. Then the Xalvian warriors burst into laughter. But this time, they weren't laughing at Leon. They were laughing at her. Vera's face burned with embarrassment. She hadn't even touched him. Not once. Leon crossed his arms. "Still think my armor is doing all the work." Vera clenched her fists, but then she grinned. "All right, human. That was interesting." Leon chuckled. "Glad you think so. Because next time, I'll make it even harder for you." Vera narrowed her eyes, her competitive spirit ignited. "Next time." "You're assuming there will be a next time." Leon smiled. "Oh, there will be." And when it happens, he reached for the clasps on his armor. The warriors around them gasped as he removed his chest plate and tossed it aside. The sight stunned them all. Beneath the armor, Leon wasn't soft like they had imagined. His body was lean, scared, and built with hard muscle from years of combat. His arms, his shoulders, everything about him looked stronger than they expected. Vera stared, speechless. Leon cracked his knuckles. "Next time, we'll fight without the armor." The air grew electric. The laughter vanished, replaced by pure curiosity and respect. For the first time in her life, Vera realized humans weren't weak. She was eager for the next battle. The training grounds of Fraxis 9 had never been this silent before. The warriors who had once mocked Sergeant Leon Carter's armor now stared at him in disbelief. His chest plate lay on the ground, tossed aside like it meant nothing. Without it, his body was fully exposed, lean, powerful, and covered in scars from past battles. Vera's smirk had vanished. She had assumed that humans were weak without their armor, but now she wasn't sure. Leon stretched his arms and rolled his shoulders, his muscles shifting under his skin. "All right, Vera. No armor this time," he said, his tone calm but confident. "Ready for another round?" Vera hesitated, her sharp nails tapping against her palm. She had been so sure that humans were fragile creatures, but now she was curious. The Xalvian warriors surrounding them exchanged whispers. Some still believed that Leon's body couldn't withstand true alien strength, but others weren't so sure anymore. Vera took a deep breath, pushing away her doubts. No matter how strong he looked, he was still human. She dropped into a battle stance. "Fine, but don't blame me if you get hurt." Leon just smiled. "I should be telling you that." The Xalvian officer raised a hand between them. "Round 2. Begin." Vera moved first, faster than before. Without hesitation, she lunged forward, her sharp claws slashing through the air. Leon didn't dodge this time. Instead, he caught her wrist. Vera's eyes widened in shock. How? She had expected his bare hands to be too slow to react, but he was faster than she thought possible. His grip was like iron, locking her arm in place before she could retreat. Leon smirked. "Not bad, but you left yourself open." Before she could react, he twisted his body and threw her over his shoulder. The world spun as Vera crashed onto the ground, hard. The Xalvian warriors gasped. Vera blinked, stunned. She had never been thrown like that before, not by a species that wasn't naturally stronger than hers. Leon took a step back, giving her a chance to recover. "Come on, I know you can do better." Vera growled, pushing herself up. Her pride burned, but she wasn't angry, she was excited. She had never faced an opponent like this before. This time, she didn't rush in blindly. She circled him, analyzing his stance. Humans were smaller than Xalvians, but Leon's movements were controlled, efficient. No wasted energy. She lunged again, but this time she faked left and twisted right, aiming a kick at his ribs. Leon blocked it with his forearm, but he slid back slightly. Vera grinned. "So, you do feel it?" Leon chuckled. "Of course, but feeling it doesn't mean it slows me down." Without warning, he grabbed her leg and swept her other foot out from under her. Vera hit the ground again, dust flying around her. She coughed and stared up at him. He wasn't even breathing hard. The crowd murmured louder now. Leon extended a hand. "Want to go again?" Vera grabbed his arm, expecting to yank him down with her strength. But he barely moved. His footing was solid. With a frustrated sigh, she let him pull her up. Leon grinned. "You're strong, but strength alone won't win fights." Vera crossed her arms, studying him. "And what does?" Leon gestured around them. "Endurance, speed, adaptability." Humans aren't the biggest, fastest, or strongest species. But we learn. We push past limits. We don't stop. Vyra frowned, thinking about it. Her people relied on their natural armor and strength, but humans had to build themselves up, piece by piece. She suddenly felt a strange respect for the man in front of her. Leon noticed her thoughtful expression and smirked. What's wrong? No more insults. Vyra huffed and shook her head. No, just processing. The watching warriors laughed, but this time it wasn't at Leon. It was at Vyra. One of them, a burly Xalvian, called out, "So, is the human still weak, Vyra?" She didn't answer immediately. Then, finally, she grinned. "No," she admitted. "He's something else." Leon chuckled. "Glad you think so, because training starts tomorrow, and I expect you to keep up." Vyra narrowed her eyes. "Oh, I will." As the crowd dispersed, murmuring about what they had just witnessed, Vyra knew one thing for certain. This human wasn't just strong. He was dangerous, and she couldn't wait to fight him again. The training grounds of Vraxis 9 were quieter than usual the next morning. The Xalvian warriors who had once laughed at Surgeon Leon Carter now watched him with a mix of respect and curiosity. No one had expected a human to stand against a Xalvian warrior without armor and still win. And no one expected Vyra, the proud and fierce fighter, to return so soon. But she did. She walked toward the center of the training ring, rolling her shoulders, her sharp blue eyes locked on Leon. He was already waiting for her, standing relaxed, arms crossed, a small smirk on his face. "You're late," Leon said. Vyra scoffed. "I wasn't late. You were just early." The other warriors chuckled. There was a new energy between them now, not mockery, but excitement. The officer stepped forward. "Are you both ready?" Vyra cracked her knuckles. "Let's see if yesterday was just luck." Leon chuckled, taking a step forward. "Luck has nothing to do with it." The officer raised his hand. "Begin." Vyra didn't rush this time. She had learned from yesterday. Charging blindly wouldn't work. Instead, she watched Leon carefully, studying his stance. She moved in, testing him with quick jabs, trying to find a weakness. Leon dodged the first, the second, the third, but on the fourth, he blocked it instead of dodging. Vyra grinned. She had forced him to react differently. She spun into a kick, aiming for his ribs. Leon raised his arm to block, but this time she didn't follow through. It was a fake. Instead, she pivoted mid-motion, bringing her other leg around. A second kick aimed straight for his head. The crowd gasped, but Leon ducked. Just barely. He felt the air from her strike rush past his face. He was impressed. She was already improving. But so was he. Before Vyra could recover, Leon moved in close, too fast for her to react. He grabbed her by the arm, and with a sudden twist, threw her to the ground. Vyra hit the dirt with a grunt. The crowd cheered. She coughed, pushing herself up quickly. That was good. Leon smiled. Better, but still predictable. Vyra wiped dust from her face and exhaled sharply. Then I'll be unpredictable. She lunged again, but instead of attacking with her hands, she went low, sweeping at Leon's legs. This time, she caught him off guard. Leon lost balance for just a second, but it was enough. Vyra slammed into him with her shoulder, knocking him to the ground. The crowd roared in excitement. Leon lay there for a moment, blinking up at the sky. Then, to everyone's surprise, he laughed. Vyra raised an eyebrow. "What's funny?" Leon sat up, shaking his head. "You learn fast." Vyra smirked, offering him a hand. "Told you I would." Leon took her hand, letting her pull him up. His grip was firm, strong, but not hostile. The Xalvian warriors clapped and cheered, excitement filling the air. Vyra grinned at Leon. "So, did I win?" Leon dusted off his uniform. "Not yet." Vira blinked. What? But I knocked you down. Leon stretched his arms. And if this was a real fight, what would happen next? Vira hesitated. Leon smirked. You knocked me down, sure, but you didn't end the fight. Realization dawned on Vira's face. Leon stepped closer, his tone calm but serious. Humans don't just give up because we fall. We get back up. Again and again. That's what makes us dangerous. Vira stared at him, considering his words. The Exalvians had always relied on their natural strength, their armor-like skin, their size. But Leon had just shown her something far more powerful. The will to keep fighting. She let out a slow breath and nodded. I understand. Leon smiled. Good, because training is just beginning. The Exalvian officer stepped forward. This was more than a fight. This was a lesson. He looked at Vira, then at Leon. And I think we all learned something today. The warriors clapped again, some even stepping forward to ask Leon questions about human training. For the first time, the Exalvians saw humans as more than just another species. They saw them as warriors. Vira folded her arms, studying Leon again. He was different. And for the first time in her life, she wanted to learn from someone stronger than her. Leon smirked at her, ready for more. Vira grinned. Always. The real training had just begun. The training grounds of Vraxis 9 had changed. Where once the Exalvian warriors laughed at Sergeant Leon Carter, they now watched him with respect. The rumors had spread. The human had fought without armor and won. But for Vira, it was more than just a rumor. She had fought him twice, and both times he had shown her something she had never seen before, a warrior's will beyond just strength. Now she wanted to understand it. Morning training begins. The sun had barely risen when Vira arrived at the training field. Leon was already there, standing calmly, his hands behind his back. Good, Leon said, nodding as she approached. You're early today. Vira scoffed. I had to make sure you didn't run away. Leon chuckled. You're getting funnier. The other Exalvian warriors gathered nearby, curious but keeping their distance. None of them had stepped forward to challenge Leon again. Only Vira had the courage to keep fighting. Leon crossed his arms. Today, we don't fight. Vira blinked. What? Leon pointed to the ground. We train. Strength is useless without control. Vira frowned. I already have control. Leon shook his head. You have power, not control. There's a difference. Vira crossed her arms, not convinced. Then show me. Leon smirked. All right. The test of endurance. Leon walked toward a large stone, one that no human should be able to lift. The Exalvian warriors chuckled when they saw where he was going. That rock is too heavy for him, one of them whispered. But Leon didn't try to lift it. Instead, he crouched down and pushed it, slowly rolling it forward. The crowd grew silent. Leon kept pushing, step by step, forcing the heavy stone forward inch by inch. Vira raised an eyebrow. What are you doing? Leon kept pushing. His muscles tensed, sweat dripped down his forehead, but he didn't stop. When the stone had moved several feet, he finally stood up, breathing hard. Then he turned to Vira. This is what I mean, he said. Strength isn't just about one powerful hit. It's about how long you can last. Vira's eyes narrowed. Leon hadn't lifted the rock in one powerful motion like she expected. Instead, he had moved it slowly without giving up. And that made her curious. Vira's challenge. Vira walked over to the stone and crouched down. I can do it, she said. Leon nodded. Go ahead. Vira placed her hands on the rock and pushed with all her strength. The stone moved instantly, rolling forward much faster than when Leon did it. The crowd cheered, but then she stopped. She smirked, turning to Leon. See, that was easy. Leon grinned. Now do it 10 more times. Vira frowned. What? Leon pointed. You moved it once. Now keep going. Vira hesitated. Moving the rock once was easy with her strength. But again and again, she clenched her jaw and pushed the rock again. It moved, but not as far this time. By the fifth push, her muscles began to burn. By the seventh push, her arms shook. By the ninth push, her breathing was ragged. And when she tried for the 10th push, she stopped. Her hands slipped. The rock didn't move. The crowd watched in silence. Leon stood beside her, arms crossed. What's wrong? Vera gritted her teeth, forcing her tired muscles to work. She pushed again, but the rock barely moved. Leon nodded. That's what I meant. Vera collapsed onto the ground, panting. She had never felt this exhausted before. Leon crouched beside her. Power means nothing if you can't keep going. Vira looked up at him, frustration in her eyes. Then how do I get stronger? Leon smirked. Now you're asking the right question. The real training begins. For the rest of the morning, Leon pushed Vira to her limit. First, it was lifting and moving heavy objects over and over, until her arms screamed in protest. Then, it was holding her stance against the wind, learning balance and control. And finally, combat drills, not just fighting, but moving with efficiency, precision, and endurance. By midday, Vera was exhausted. She lay on the ground, staring up at the sky. Her body ached, but her mind was sharp. Leon sat beside her, drinking from a water flask. You're improving, he said. Vira huffed. I feel like I'm dying. Leon chuckled. That's how you know it's working. Vera closed her eyes for a moment, then smiled. For the first time in her life, she wasn't just fighting to win. She was fighting to learn. And she liked it. The moment of respect. As the sun began to set, the Zalvian warriors gathered again. They had watched Vera struggle, fall, and get back up again and again. They had never seen her work this hard before. Leon stood up and stretched. Tomorrow, we go even harder. Vera groaned. Of course we do. The warriors laughed. But this time, it wasn't at her. It was because they respected her. Vira smirked, standing up. I'll be ready. Leon nodded. I know you will. As she walked away, something felt different. She no longer saw Leon as just a human. She saw him as a warrior. And now, she wanted to be one too. The next morning, the training grounds of Vraxis 9 were filled with tension. The Zalvian warriors gathered once again, eager to see what would happen next between Sergeant Leon Carter and Vera. Yesterday, Leon had pushed Vera past her limits. She had struggled, fallen, but gotten back up every time. But today, she looked different. Her stance was stronger, her eyes focused. She was ready. Leon's new challenge. Leon stood waiting, arms crossed. His expression was unreadable. Vera stepped forward. What's the plan today? Leon smiled. Simple. He pointed behind her. Vira turned, and her eyes widened. A massive training dummy stood in the center of the field. It was built from reinforced metal and thick stone, designed to withstand the strongest attacks. Vera smirked. You want me to break that? Leon shook his head. No. Vira frowned. Then what? Leon picked up a small wooden stick and tossed it to her. Vera caught it, confused. What is this? Leon's smirk widened. You're going to break the dummy with that. The warriors around them burst into laughter. Vera scowled. You're joking. Leon shook his head. Not at all. Vera scoffed. This is impossible. No one can break a stone dummy with a stick. Leon took a step closer, his expression calm. Are you so sure? Vira hesitated. She didn't like this. She was strong, not weak. She had trained for years. What was the point of this? Leon crossed his arms. Go on. Try it. Vera gritted her teeth. She stepped forward, gripped the stick, and swung at the dummy as hard as she could. A loud crack echoed through the field. The wooden stick snapped in half. The dummy remained untouched. The crowd laughed again. Vira's face burned with frustration. She turned to Leon, her fists clenched. What was the point of that? Leon smiled. The point is, you thought power alone would work. Vera narrowed her eyes. Leon picked up another stick. A second chance. This time, he said, don't use force. Use control. Vira hesitated, but she took the stick. She studied the dummy. Her instincts told her to swing as hard as possible, but she knew Leon wanted her to think differently. She stepped forward, adjusted her grip, and took a slow, steady breath. This time, she focused. Instead of using raw strength, she aimed for a weak point, the seam between two stone plates. She swung, not for power, but for precision. The stick snapped again, but something else happened. A tiny crack appeared on the dummy. The warriors fell silent. Leon nodded approvingly. Now you understand. Vera stared at the crack, then at Leon. It's not just about strength. Leon smiled. It's about knowing where and how to strike. Vira's turning point. The training continued. Leon put Vira through drills she had never considered before. Instead of just hitting harder, she practiced hitting smarter. Instead of just using her muscles, she learned to use balance and timing. By midday, she was exhausted, but her mind was sharper than ever. She dropped onto the ground, panting. I thought I knew everything about fighting. Leon sat beside her, smirking. And now? Vera exhaled. Now, I see how little I knew. Leon leaned back on his elbows. That's what makes a real warrior. You don't just fight, you learn. You adapt. Vira looked at him differently now. She had mocked him once, thinking he was weak without his armor. But now she saw the truth. Leon was stronger than most warriors she had ever met. Not because of brute force, but because he never stopped learning. And now, neither would she. A new challenge. As the sun began to set, Leon stood up and stretched. Tomorrow, he said, we spar again. Vera smirked. And this time, I'll win. Leon chuckled. We'll see. She wasn't fighting against him anymore. She was fighting to be better. And for the first time, she felt truly alive. The training grounds of Fraxis 9 had transformed. No longer were they a place for mocking or casual combat. The Exalvian warriors, once skeptical of the human soldier's abilities, now watched him with respect, as did Vera, who had learned more in the past few days than she ever expected. It had been a week since Leon began teaching her. Each day, he pushed her harder, challenging her to go beyond her limits. But now, it was time for something different. Vera stood on the field, waiting for Leon to arrive. The sun was high, casting long shadows across the dirt, and the air was thick with anticipation. When Leon finally walked onto the field, he wasn't alone. With him were 3 other Exalvian warriors, each one larger and more powerful than Vera. They looked down at her, eyes filled with challenge. Vera swallowed. This was the test. The test begins. Leon stood beside her, a calm smile on his face. These 3 are going to spar with you, he said. You'll have to fight them one at a time, but you can't let them overwhelm you. Vera nodded, feeling her heart race. She had faced Leon twice, but facing 3 warriors at once was something else entirely. The first Salvian stepped forward, his muscles bulging under his armor. His eyes glinted with arrogance, knowing that he was stronger than Vera. Leon spoke again, his tone serious. You've trained for this. Don't rely on strength. Use everything you've learned. Speed, precision, endurance. The warrior charged, his claws extended, aiming for Vera's chest. Vera sidestepped quickly, her training taking over. She didn't have time to think, only to react. With a swift movement, she grabbed the warrior's arm and twisted it, throwing him off balance. The warrior stumbled but didn't fall. His growl was full of anger as he turned to face her again. Vira didn't wait. She lunged forward, her movements fast and calculated. She aimed for his weak spot, his side, and landed a hit that staggered him. He stepped back, winded but not defeated. He swung again, but this time, Vera ducked, rolling out of the way and onto her feet. The first warrior paused, taking a moment to evaluate her. "Impressive," he muttered, "but not enough." Vera didn't respond. Instead, she moved into her next stance, prepared for the second warrior. The second Zalvian warrior was taller and faster than the first. He darted toward Vera, his body agile and quick. He slashed at her, but Vera barely managed to block the attack. She felt the force of his strike push her back, but she didn't fall. She stayed focused, remembering Leon's words: adapt, control. The second warrior grinned, obviously enjoying the fight. He swung again, faster this time. Vera couldn't block it entirely, and the edge of his claw grazed her arm. The pain was sharp, but Vera didn't flinch. She fought through it, using her free hand to push him back and regain control. She stepped closer, dodging his claws and landing a punch to his midsection. He grunted in surprise, but it didn't slow him down. But Vera was different now. She had learned to anticipate, to wait for the right moment. She was no longer just reacting. She was planning. With a quick strike to his leg, she sent him stumbling to the ground, his claws unable to keep his balance. He snarled, pushing himself back up. But this time, he was less confident. The final challenge. Vera stood tall, facing the third and final warrior. This one was massive, even larger than the others, and his movements were slow, deliberate. His eyes locked on Vera with the intent to finish the fight. Leon's voice echoed in her mind. "Remember, it's not about how hard you hit. It's about how well you control the fight." The final warrior charged, his steps heavy but powerful. Vera didn't back down. She stood her ground, waiting for him to make his move. He swung his fists down, trying to crush her with the force of his strength. Vera sidestepped, but his arm brushed past her, grazing her shoulder. The force of his swing sent her stumbling backwards, but she regained her balance quickly. She couldn't afford to make a mistake. This last warrior had the advantage, but Vera had something he didn't: her speed. She darted forward, using his weight against him. As he swung again, she ducked under his arm and struck his back, forcing him to stagger forward. He growled in frustration, turning to face her, but Vera didn't wait. She went in again, targeting the weak points she had learned to spot during her training. After a few more strikes, the third warrior fell to his knees, out of breath and unable to continue. Victory and respect. The field fell silent. The other Xalvian warriors stood in shock, staring at Vera, who stood tall and breathing heavily. The final warrior, still kneeling, looked up at her with a new expression: respect. "Well done," he said. "You have proven yourself." Vera turned to Leon, her heart racing. She had done it. Leon smiled and walked over to her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You've learned a lot in a short time, Vera. But remember this: strength alone will never win a battle. It's your will to never give up, no matter the odds, that makes you a true warrior." Vera smiled, finally understanding. She had come a long way, not just in her physical abilities, but in her mindset. She had learned to think before she acted, to control the fight instead of letting it control her. As the warriors gathered around, nodding in approval, Vera felt a sense of accomplishment she had never known before. She was no longer just a warrior. She was a true fighter, one who had learned the most important lesson of all. The sun dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows over the training field of Fraxis 9. The air was thick with the sounds of warriors catching their breath and the soft buzz of the wind. It had been a long day of intense training, but for Vera, it felt like a new beginning. She had spent days honing her skills, learning from Sergeant Leon Carter, a human who had proven that strength wasn't everything. Today, for the first time, Vera had fought alongside the other Xalvian warriors, showing them that her control over the fight was just as important as her strength. She stood at the edge of the field, watching the last of the sparring matches. Her body ached from the day's effort, but a sense of pride filled her chest. Behind her, Leon walked over with a smile. His usual calm expression softened with approval. "You did well today," he said, his voice warm. "The other warriors are beginning to see what I see." Vira turned, giving him a nod. "I feel different," she said. "Like I understand the fight now." Leon raised an eyebrow. "Different how?" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Before, I only thought about winning, about being the strongest. Now I realize that winning isn't the same as fighting well. It's about knowing when to push, when to hold back." Leon smiled. "That's exactly it. The human way is about adaptability, finding a way to use every advantage, even when you don't have the most power." Vira turned her eyes back to the sparring warriors. She had come so far in such a short time. When she had first met Leon, she had thought he was just another weak human, someone to be tested, someone to be defeated. Now she saw him differently. The final test. Later that night, when the training grounds had cleared, Leon approached her again, a hint of mischief in his eyes. "You've done well, Vira, but I have one last test for you," he said. Vira's eyes narrowed, curiosity peaking. "What's the test?" Leon stepped back, gesturing toward the darkening field. "We fight again. This time, no rules, no armor, just us. The final test will be to see how far you've truly come." Vira's heart raced. She had fought Leon before, twice, but each time she had relied on her natural strength and techniques. Now, without armor and in the open, she would face him again. Only this time, she would have to use everything she had learned. She nodded. "I'm ready." The fight without armor. The arena was now quiet, empty except for the two combatants. The moonlight bathed the field in an eerie glow. Leon stood across from her, relaxed but focused. Vira felt the pressure rise in her chest, but she knew that this fight wasn't about proving herself to him. It was about proving herself to herself. Without a word, Leon started to move, slowly at first. Vira followed, her body tense, waiting for his next move. Leon's eyes locked onto hers as he advanced, his steps light and calculated. Vira shifted to meet him, remembering his lessons about timing, control, and precision. The first strike came fast. Leon's fist aimed for her ribs. But Vira had learned not to react impulsively. She ducked, avoiding the strike, and with a quick turn, she aimed a punch toward his side. Leon's body shifted, and her fist landed only a glancing blow. She followed up with a low kick to his legs, but this time, Leon didn't dodge. He stepped into the attack, using her momentum against her. Before she knew it, he had grabbed her wrist and twisted it. Her body flipped in the air as he used the smallest of movements to redirect her force. Vira hit the ground hard but rolled, quickly getting back to her feet. This was different. She had learned to avoid brute force, but Leon's technique was beyond anything she had encountered. He was fast, efficient, and always one step ahead. The moment of clarity. Vira wiped the sweat from her brow, breathing heavily. She could feel the pain in her muscles, but she was no longer angry or frustrated. Instead, she had a sense of calm, a realization that the fight was no longer about winning. Leon was right. The key to a warrior's strength was not in how much damage they could deal, but how much they could endure, how well they could learn. Leon came at her again, his movements fluid, his eyes sharp. This time, Vira didn't hesitate. She moved with him, anticipating his next move, staying one step ahead. She countered his strike, used his balance against him, and pushed him back. Leon stumbled slightly, but Vira didn't stop. She followed up, this time with a controlled strike to his shoulder, pushing him further. Leon grinned. "You've learned," he said. She stopped, looking down at him. For the first time, She saw him as a peer, not an opponent to defeat, but a warrior who had shared his wisdom. Leon stood up slowly, his eyes meeting hers. "You've done it, Vyra. You've proven that strength isn't just about muscle. It's about heart. And you've got plenty of that." The warrior's path. The two warriors stood in the moonlight, both breathing heavily, but neither one feeling defeated. Vyra nodded, her chest swelling with pride. "I don't need armor to fight anymore. I am the weapon." Leon smiled, his eyes full of admiration. Exactly. The Zalvian warriors who had once mocked her now stood at a distance, watching with new respect. They had seen her struggle, seen her push past her own limitations, and they knew she had earned her place as a warrior. Vera glanced at Leon one last time. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything." Leon only nodded, his smile never fading. "The real training is just beginning, but you're ready for whatever comes next." As the night deepened, Vera walked away, feeling stronger than ever. She had faced her own doubts, defeated her own ego, and in the process became a true warrior, no longer just an alien, but someone who could stand shoulder to shoulder with anyone, regardless of species. And she knew this was just the beginning of her journey.